So,
Beautiful.
welcome everyone to today's continuing education series session. We're very happy to welcome Alexa Becker, who's an independent consultant now, also portfolio reviewer, curator, and advisor to photographers and publishing houses. And you've been working, Alexa, in the field for over 20 years, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So we discussed with Alexa what would be interesting for you, and we know a lot of you want to publish photo books. I know a lot of you have photo books in your book collections, let's say. So we said we would discuss why photo books still matter, why it is very relevant to publish books on certain topics. I know that at Kehrer Verlag, where you have been their acquisitions editor, you worked on a wide range of topics that were probably dear to you as well as to the publishing house. So yeah, from your experience, we'll learn more about publishing today, and I'll just give the word to you, Alexa, and thank again our partners at PhotoInks for supporting this kind of lectures and for really being partners with us in this wonderful project of 7 communities. So welcome, Alexa, again.
Thank you, Nika, so much for the warm words and introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here today with me. I do want to talk about why photo books matter, and I want to help you understand the photography publishing scene a little bit better if you want to publish your book. It really enhances the chances that you can succeed and navigate the market because it's quite intricate, I want to say. And so I hope to be able to share some knowledge today. And I'm really glad we're going to have the Q&A at the end of the lecture. It's going to be another half hour. So if you have questions, write them down, ask them later on, because right now I will be diving into my presentation. And let's see if that works. Okay, just a second. Right. And as we're in this presentation mode, I can probably not see you raising a hand, or maybe I'm not a big multitasker and I won't see that, somebody wrote something in the chat. So save your questions for later. That would be fantastic. Okay, well, let's start. Whilst this course or lecture lasts only 1 hour, I'm trying to cover as much ground as possible. Other than that, I'm teaching workshops at ICP and Houston Center for Photography alternating, which means I can go into detail on a deeper level. So if you're interested in that, check it out. There is still the opportunity to dive deeper or to get in touch personally if you seek individual guidance. So our topics today. First of all, I want to raise the question and answer it. Why publish? Then I will be talking about the photo book as an object, but also what it means to your career. About the value of a photo book. And I want to then introduce you to the different business models that publishers are applying, which is, of course, connected closely to financing, to questions of money, why to bring it to the table, how much, and how this all works. And also a point that is really important and I find cannot be stressed enough is networking, the need to network, how to network, and therefore to build an audience for your topics, for your photography, because without that, the book is a standalone object that is kind of a little bit lost. So all of this I'm trying to discuss or present you, and then we'll see where that takes us. Okay, I've heard that you already know a little bit about myself, and I don't want to dive too deeply into this. I am an art historian. I'm not a photo expert by nature, so to say. I worked for a long time at Kehrer Verlag, as Nika pointed out. I'm a jury member, I sit on juries and competitions, but the bottom line is I consider myself a photography enthusiast, and if I can help photographers with my advice or with my teachings, I'm a happy person. So since 2021, I'm an independent consultant, but of course, I do maintain strong ties with my home publisher, with Kehrer Verlag and other publishers out there. All right. Just to give you a quick idea of the diversity of my publishing background and what Kehrer Verlag published the last years. So we can see here a really, broad range of photography books like photojournalists like Danish Siddiqui, really hardcore photojournalist, but also more poetic work and personal work, like or where the world is melting by Ragnar Axelsson is also documentary, but more on the personal side. We have street photography. We have, of course, books about issues like the pandemic or more spiritually in oriented books like All the Colors I Am Inside. And we also have bigger names like Soul Lighter. So there's this big mix. And a lot of independent publishers have a broader range of photography books. It doesn't mean that there's only one publisher that you have to seek out in order to place your project. It could be various, actually, just to give you an idea about that. Okay, so let's talk about publishing. Why publish? So there are like broadly three reasons I would say to publish. The first one is your project is simply meant to be told in book form, and I'm going to give you an example of what that means. Or you have a story to tell and you want it to last for years to come. And this is what a book can do, of course. It will last, it will be there. It's not short-lived by any means. And you want to boost your career as a photographer. Of course, all three can apply or just one. These are all valid reasons to publish your photo book. So when I say your project is simply meant to be told in book form, I'm talking about projects that feature topics that are not so easy to be digested, that are not meant to be like big on the wall in a gallery. So what can that be? For example, some years ago, I helped publishing this book by Christoph Bangert. It's called War Porn. War porn is, so I should say a couple of words about Christoph. Christoph is now a photography professor, but he used to be a photojournalist covering war zones and in Afghanistan, Iraq, Indonesia, Lebanon, Gaza, so he was basically a photojournalist. And then all of a sudden he was thinking, of course he was selling, his images to the media, and some got accepted, some not, the game, of course they cannot accept all, they have to make a selection. And that made him think, okay, in a way there is a form of censorship going on, right? And that was one component he asked himself. He also asked himself, is it okay for me to depict people in difficult life situations and circumstances? Is that voyeuristic? Is it legitimate to portray these people? And the pictures I'm using, is that it's kind of like this weird fascination about it for the public. So is what I do I create war porn in that sense? And the third component was that his grandfather used to be in the Nazi army. So whenever Christoph asked his granddad, okay, what was the war like? He would start telling him stories about, his horses and his dog and, like always reporting some nice things about the war. And Christoph thought, okay, this can't be the whole truth. When my kids, he has two daughters, when my kids are going to ask me, okay, Daddy, what did you do in those war zones, or what happened to you, or did you witness? I want to present them something that speaks the truth. Okay, and that's why he prepared this book. And I will briefly stop the presentation in order to show you this book. As you can see, it's kind of small. It has this very raw material. Actually, this is just the cardboard that you use for each book. For every hardcover has this kind of gray, rough cardboard. And then paper is glued upon it, which bears the actual cover image and the title. So by choice, he wanted to use very poor materials, and he opted for an open spine. So everything here speaks of, rawness, and it's a very simplistic approach, because he didn't, of course, he couldn't make this a coffee table book. With some images or some pages are in Japanese binding, which means, sorry, want to show it to you. The pages are still uncut. So you can decide whether you cut it as, owner of the book and look at what's inside, or whether you apply self-censorship yourself and you just look at the images that you can freely access. So also, while you're looking at the book, you're applying self-censorship, because you decide, what do I look at and what not. When I first saw the book dummy at the Frankfurt Book Fair, I didn't look at it in its whole entirety. I wasn't able to. I looked at a couple of images. I understood what this was about, and I closed it again. Or I flipped through it. I couldn't stand taking it all in at once. So yeah, there's censorship going on in the media, in personal histories, and in your own head, basically. Also, Christoph said, and maybe you've experienced that as well, that sometimes he didn't even remember taking some of these images, because his brain would just shut it out, the experience. And then he looked at his archive and was like, oh, wow, I did take this image, So yeah, this, to make a long story short, this is one of the titles that is worth being told in form of a book, because, as I said before, it's not for, being necessarily presented on a wall in a gallery. Let me continue with the presentation. Okay. So yeah, this was war porn. Let's get to the next example. So you have a story to tell, and you want it to last for years to come. One very good example for that is Robert Frank's The Americans. And Steidl, the publisher, wrote a really good text about it. And I will read it to you real fast. I know you know what it's about, but this sums it up really nicely. Published in the United States in 1959, Robert Frank's The Americans changed the course of 20th century photography in a book, In 83 photographs, Frank looked beneath the surface of American life to reveal a people plagued by racism, ill-served by their politicians, and rendered numb by a rapidly expanding culture of consumption. I think that's still very much true. Yet, he also found novel ideas of beauty in simple overlooked corners of American life. And it was not just Frank's subject matter, cars, jukeboxes, and even the road itself, that redefined the icons of America. It was also his seemingly intuitive, immediate, off-kilter style, as well as his method of brilliantly linking his photographs together thematically, conceptually, formally, and linguistically, that made the Americans so innovative. More of an ode or a poem than a literal document, the book is as powerful and provocative today as it was 56 years ago. So, as I said, some ideas and concept will last because they're presented in book form, and this is a really beautiful and very successful example of that. So the last point, you want to boost your career as a photographer. Of course, you want to do that, right? Why is this possible? Publishers still have some kind of gatekeeper function. Um, they will not allow every project into their roster or on their list and include it in their program, because if they did, they would lose their profile, let's say. So they have special interests and they will accept only what they consider the best projects. So that really means something if you were accepted into hopefully a renowned publishing house. Also, the book, of course, underlines your seriousness of your career. To curators and gallerists, if they see, okay, you come along with a book that is nicely printed and nicely done, they know how much effort went into this, how much planning, resources, funding, etc. So that really means something. And it promotes your work and yourself, which means if the right person gets your books and holds it in their hands, you might get more editorial jobs, more commissions, more workshops, and it may also increase the work's value, speaking of print sales. So all of this can happen through a book, and therefore it's beneficial for your career as a photographer. So also, I would like to point out the difference between having a project, that's one thing, and having a photo book, that's the other thing. So what's the difference here? I would say if you have a project, you've thought of some kind of story or you've found a story you want to tell. You might have a certain emotion going on there, or a kind of self-exploration you're dealing with. I know as photojournalists, you're probably not so much on that side than the fine art photographers I usually work with, but it can be true for you too. And there's certainly common aspects in that. After all, you have a collection of images. Okay, so this is what you have and what you need to call it a project, basically. If you plan a book, you have to introduce some kind of objectivity here, which means you have to introduce a structure, an edit, you have to select images so that will go in the mix and tell the story as adequately as you wish. You have to create an order and categories first. So yeah, all in all, you have to restructure, you have to really structure it. You will probably add some text that helps illuminate the topic and will totally add to what you have visually. And last but not least, you will add a body for this um, virtual project by choosing materials, papers, binding, etc. So this is all that it takes to have a book in hand in the end. So there's the main differences. And of course, in order to have a book, you really have to rethink your approach and what you want to say several times. So it's not like done, as you probably know, like within a week or so. It's a longer process. And because you want to publish a book in the end, you really have to immerse yourself into this process of really thinking about what you want to say critically and challenge yourself all the time, get other people's opinions, try to integrate that and make it the best work that you have, because it's going to be out there for years to come. So you can have beautiful projects, okay, but no matter what you do with the projects, it will be shorter lived than a book. If some media uses the images, fine, it's a rather different thing, I would say. Okay, so the book. Imagine you have found a publisher and they want to do your book. Um, usually the publisher will come to you and say, okay, how do you envision the book? How many images do you have? How many pages should it have? How much text? Who are the authors? What kind of materials were you thinking? And sometimes photographers are overwhelmed by all these questions. So, how do you know what you want, right? I would say check out other photography books. That's really important to do to look at as many books as you can, like in shops, but also at fairs and in your bookshelf and your friends' bookshelves. Just take them all in. And also pay attention to the texts. So reading is sometimes necessary, and the authors you liked in those books. So taking in a book visually is one thing, but also paying attention to how it's done and who contributed in a way that impressed you. That's another very important thing. Yeah, also pay attention to the design of a book. Of course, what impressed you? Was it the size? Was it like fake leather or, do you want a dust jacket? You don't want a dust jacket. These are the things that once you have in mind that you want to publish yourself, you will look at all these books in a different way, in a more, let's say, strategic way, and that's a good thing. Um, so, and yeah, keep a list of favorites of your favorite designers and authors, other photographers. That can be really helpful because, taking in books, browsing books, experiencing them is really a way to train your aesthetic brain, so to say, which is an intuitive process, but really knowing what kind of design you like, what text you like, etc., is really worth making a list. Yeah, and train your eye by visiting exhibitions too. It's all interconnected, basically, I would say. Also, read about photography in your spare time or listen to podcasts or check out blogs. There's several out there that are really, really interesting, and the people who do them are very dedicated. I'm thinking about Fleck Photo or Lens Culture or Blind or Lens Scratch. I mean, there's so much to learn, and there's such a big variety of photography and photographers out there. It's really enjoyable to also think about or also hear about what others do and how they do it. All right, the book. The book itself, of course, is a tangible proof of your work. It can be a collector's item, if it's beautifully done. It will obviously be your extended business card, meaning whenever you meet somebody or you send it to a person that you think is important to your career potentially, it will not only bear your name, but so much more than that. So in other words, it'll be a career tool. And yeah, depending on your subject matter, it will have a social impact, of course. So all of this is packed in a book, so to say. All right, so the book is a PR and marketing tool as well. It helps yourself to position you as a photographer in the photography scene. And it would also help you to create your own brand. So what makes you unique and special? What makes you different from others? All of this is comprised in your book or in your books that are you going to publish. So apart from the collectible, it's all of this, really hard fact things too. So talking about your career, there are a couple of essential questions because if you start out as a photographer, it's probably not a smart idea if you just have one project on your back to publish a book right away. So you have to ask yourself, is this the right point in time? Which means, do I have the resources? May it be time to apply for grants, to contact journalists, to contact and research publishing houses? Do I have the financial resources? Do I have time to um, create a Kickstarter or crowdfunding of whatever kind, etc. So yeah, do I have the capacity to do that right now? And do I have the right project? Because you may have several projects that are really great as themselves, but maybe don't lend themselves so much to being published as books. Yeah, so not every project has to be a book, in other words. We have plenty of books already as it is. All right, let's get to different business models in publishing. Just let me take a quick sip. All right. Overall, we have two main groups of publishing, and one is general interest publishing and independent publishing. I will go into that in a minute, you know what that means. So, independent publishing is usually means it's an owner-operated publishing house, or it can be nonprofit publishing, it can be university press, or it is self-publishing. So self-publishing is also maybe I would say the most independent form of publishing anyhow. So all of these can be assembled under the umbrella term of independent publishing. General interest publishers are publishing houses like Prestel, Thames and Hudson, Chronicle, Phaidon, Taschen too, whereas Taschen is still owner operated. However, it's not I mean, it is an independent publishing house, but of its own kind because it addresses with the topics, it publishes a very, very broad audience. And that's what I mean with general interest. You know, it is a very, it doesn't speak only to photography people, but to people who, I don't know, are into design and hotels and, you know, whatever, you know, you name it. I think you know what I mean. So to give you some concrete examples of independent publishers, we have Steidel, we have Mac in the UK, TBW Books in California, Kehrer Verlag, Chose Commune in France, and Photo Evidence, probably the most suitable publisher to photojournalists. I'm sure you are aware of them. Yeah, so just to give you a few names, of course, the list goes on and on and on, as you can see in the different photo festivals, you know, where you have book tables and stuff, but just to name a few. So there's also the group of non-profit publishers, as I said before, and they also belong in independent publishers, which is, for example, Aperture, Radius, and Princeton Architectural Press, etc. And we have, of course, self-publishing, print on demand that is served by Blurb and all the others that you can see here, but also sometimes offset printing houses have a digital arm and you can print your book there individually. And there is a very interesting publishing platform, Self-Publish Be Happy. It has become a publisher itself, but it was actually just meant to assemble all self-published books that have taken rise since about 2000 something, you know, when digital printing became better and better and self-publishing bloomed. And there was this guy, Bruno Cashel, who lives in England, and said, you know, we have to collect all these self-published books because otherwise they will get lost. And check out the website. They have very interesting workshop offers and find out what they're all about. I think it's pretty awesome. So financing. Usually it's said, okay, there is no money in books. That might be true for independent publishers. However, there are publishers, and I'm speaking of the general interest publishers who have found strategies to publish books that sell and they make money. So how does that work? For example, just Prestel here, it was actually founded a long time ago in Frankfurt, Germany. but belongs now to the Penguin Random House Publishing Group, which again belongs to Bertelsmann, which is a very, very big conglomerate. They host like 275 imprints under this roof. So it's a very, very big mothership. And Prestel, as the photography publisher, seems to be acting like independently under this roof, so to say. But of course, they are liable to the mothership financially. They have to make money because otherwise they're going to be made redundant and they're going to be kicked out. So, yeah, this is the thing. They have to make money, and therefore that influences their choices. So they have to publish titles that are foreseeably bought by, yes, the photo community, but also, art-loving people, people who love New York, 50 contemporary photographers that you should know. So basically, maybe cheaper book, but like overviews of photography, or let's say Bauhaus. I mean, that's a very well-known, brand nowadays. Um, this kind of um, titles, basically, or Daido Moriyama, Helmut Newton, Monet, just to give you an example that it is like really big names. So their business strategy is big names and licenses. What does that mean? So big names sell, okay. Um, that's one thing. What happens when you have a big name is that you can sell a license to other publishers who may be interested in publishing, let's say, Helmut Newton in Spain or France or Germany, in England, etc. So if you have this wonderful project by a very well-known photographer, you can say, okay, as Prestel, we're going to print this next June, and you approach other publishers and say, do you want to join me? You can buy a license to publish this in Germany, for example. And then you will buy this license, get a number of books that you will pre-buy, let's say 2,000 books or so. You have to exchange the text, of course, have a translation. But in the end, all of these licensed books, these different language editions, will be printed at the same time, which of course creates synergies and makes it much cheaper compared to each publisher printing their own little batch of books, so to say. So Prestel profits from selling licenses. The name that is being sold profits because it has a much bigger outlet in all these countries. And in the end, more books are sold and more revenues are being brought in. So that's quite fantastic. And they can make money with that. So what does that mean to you as a photographer in case you become famous, or you make your career and you submit your project to Prestel? That means that if they accept your project, they will finance your project, which is pretty amazing. However, they will also influence and shape your project. That means they will have a say in what the cover should look like, what the title should be. Maybe they will also have a word in the concept. And of course, they will dictate or suggest the retail price that they think is the right fit for this book. So because, as I said, because they're liable to the commercial success of the book, and their sales target is a minimum of 5,000 to 6,000 copies per title, whereas independent publishers are operating on a much, much larger scale. But then again, if you ask me, they tend to have the more interesting works and books in their program. We'll see. So this is it about how general interest publishers, the big publishers, make their money. And you already understand why it's so hard to get in there. Because if you are a newcomer, the chances that you're being accepted by them is, against zero, basically. Or you're lucky and you find a powerful gallery that kind of takes a liking in your work, either way. Yeah, this is it. Let's head over to the independent publishers, which are, as I said before, most of the time or owner operated. You might be familiar, or you're certainly familiar with Gerhard Steidl from Steidl Publishers. Then I picked Tiffany Jones, who might not be so well known, or, she's a really wonderful publisher and designer. She also takes care that the books and the project she publishes, she helps funding them, trying to find the funds. She's very much engaged in the whole process, which also means, of course, since she's like this one woman show, she can only afford to publish, let's say, 3 to 4 books per year, whether Steidl publishes, I don't know, maybe 60, 80 books a year. I don't know precisely. But there's a huge difference already between these two. Then we have Mac books. Michael Mack used to work for Gerhard Steidl. Gerhard was his mentor, actually. And then after 10 years or so, Michael Mack started his own publishing house in London. Klaus Kehrer, again, he used to be my boss, and what they all have in common is a very personal preference for certain topics, but basically they all operate the same. They all need money in order to publish their books. Gerhard Steidl does this very elegantly through also publishing for big brands like Chanel and Fendi, etc. He also has a literature branch with big names that bring in money, so he can cross-finance photo books. However, mostly he publishes photo books by photographers who are really well known, but there are a couple in there that might not make their money in the first place. So, but all the others really have to look, okay, how do we get the money? And more often than not, this problem, so to say, is transferred to the photographer. Okay, so the question might be, okay, what kind of choices do independent publishers make? Because with the general interest publishers, we saw, okay, it's kind of like doing the math, is it a well-known name? Is it a well-known topic? Okay, we can sell a lot of books and we make money. With independent publishers, it's a little bit different, and I found this a very telling quote by Michael Mack I want to read to you. He says, I have to admit that if you go and look at the books I've published so far, it's actually the kind of photography that I also prefer. My personal taste, out of necessity, greatly influences the type of books I publish. I don't simply cater to packaging ideas by letting the market decide what works or not. I start with the artist's thoughts and choose based on my own tastes. Then my tastes don't always work out. And I think that's a very important sentence, because there's real beauty in the fact that, all these independent publishers start out very idealistically and they want to publish the books that no one else publishes. And, you can be very emotional and enthusiastic about a project, but it might not sell. And if that happens, and it might be very likely that it doesn't work out because the market is full of books and there's a lot of competition, in order to secure yourself as a business and a company, which a publishing house is in the end, you have to ask for a financial contribution, because otherwise you will be bankrupt like after 1 or 2 years. And the photographer also profits from a publisher that does not go bankrupt after 1 or 2 years, because you want the publisher to be out there for years and years to come in order to promote your book, to carry your book, and to be a name that is stable and reliable and well known. So let's look at the books that are being published out of personal taste. I selected only 3. One is by Kehrer Verlag, It's Been Pouring by Rachel Popo, US photographer. And this is about postpartum depression. And it was published at a time where this was not a popular topic to talk about. And of course, the content is quite serious and not so easy to deal with. But it's important to be out there. It's important to address it. And as she is a mother of two and suffered the same, and she's a photographer, of course, she wanted to bring this into book form, this project. Yeah, right. And the publication in the middle is published or was published by the RSK Connection, a wonderful independent publisher in Breda in the Netherlands, and it's Forgotten Seas by Tanja Engelberts. And it's a testament of 70 years of gas and oil drilling in the North Sea, an industrial landscape that is slowly disappearing, which means, okay, you can tell the topic is kind of, it's not for everyone. It's not Monet and it's not Daida Moriyama or whatever. It's like really a very specific topic, but it's super interesting to a certain group of people, of course. And if it's well photographed, of course, too. And then we have someone you probably know very well, Laia Abril. I just picked this one on rape and institutional failure, which is a part of her ongoing series of books that deal with a history of misogyny. So she's a very engaged photographer. And as you can tell already by the title, these are also topics that are, shocking at times and disturbing. And, you know what I'm talking about. So just look at this range of three books and you know that these are not an easy sell. Okay, so what do independent publishers then do in order to gain money or to at least not go bankrupt? You have to co-fund your book. You can do this via grants, crowdfunding, or print sales. Before the digital age and before crowdfunding even existed, it was normal. And I guess you started publishing a little bit at a later point in your career where you already had a bit of a following, some collectors that you could ask directly to either pre-buy books, donate money, or you created an extra print sale, which was meant to gain money that then went into the new book. So this is what you did in the old times, basically. Now crowdfunding is a wonderful method to gain money, to gather money, and also to get some marketing and interest in your project. So basically, you and the publisher have a shared financial risk, but you also have more liberty in design and content of the book because let's face it, you bring in a lot of money, so you have to have a creative impact. It's not possible, in my opinion, that then the publishing house acts as the big, decision maker and says, oh, but, the cover has to look like this and that. No, no, no. You're partners in crime here. And I think that's actually a good thing that you have this liberty on one hand, but also you have the expertise of a publishing house on the other hand. There is no formal minimum sales goal. I mean, it will, they will try to imagine and guess how many books they can sell, also depending on how much you can do for the books. Let's say, promotion wise, if you can arrange for shows, book signings, talks, etc. But there's no minimum where they say, okay, we have to sell 6,000. That's simply not possible. Some independent publishers publish 500, 700, 800,000 books, but that's kind of the range in which this takes place. Yeah. Print run is usually around 1,000 books or lower. So you may ask yourself, okay, if I have to bring in money, actually, what factors constitute my share of costs? I put this together. So basically, the technical specifics of your book and the print run determine the production costs. So let's say if you have a huge book, of course, it's going to cost more than, this little tiny war porn book, if you have lots of pages, lots of text that maybe also needs to be translated, lots of images that have to be treated, very elaborate design, that takes upon many hours. You want to have 2 test prints, etc. All these are the production costs, basically. So we have that. Plus, we have the general publishing costs. These are fixed costs like that the publisher has to carry, like um, they have to pay their distribution, they have to pay sales reps, they have a marketing and PR team, they go to fairs, probably, hopefully, and such. So this is fixed costs that you also have to take into account, minus foreseeable sales, meaning net sales proceeds. If you sell a book for $40, you're not going to get back $40, of course, but what you're getting back is the net sales proceeds, which means a certain sum of money after the deduction of provisions and discounts to the booksellers, provision to the sales reps, etc. So if you sell a book of $40, you may get back as a publisher 12, 15, $10, not so much, basically. And that is your contribution. So on one hand, we have the production costs against, what do we think we can sell? And usually there's a gap because you probably will have a book that is very costly to produce and a low print run. And there's this financial gap that you as an artist have to cover somehow, either through crowdfunding or, whatever you can come up with, basically. With self-publishing, financing, of course, is entirely your business. But you will also be completely free in your choices, and all returns from sales will be yours. Of course, there you also have to take into account that you also, as an independent publishers, you may want to, or you have to give discounts to people, to booksellers, to other people. So it looks pretty good at first sight, but don't forget there's also discounts and shipping costs and material for shipping books out there that have to be taken into account. In the end, it's all your time. And if you don't have the expertise in each field that needs to be covered when you publish a book, let's say design, proofreading, translating, image processing, etc., you have to buy all these items. You have to pay a specialist that treats your images. You have to pay a translator, etc., etc. So there goes a lot of money too. And you have to organize and supervise all this process. You have to be your own project manager. And all these jobs would have normally been done by a publisher. That's why a publisher is also more, expensive than if you just take your project and have it printed digitally printed, So you may, with an independent publisher, you have to invest, let's say, $15,000. And if you printed at a digital printer, you probably invest like 6,000 or 4, depending on your book. That's all fine, but I'm just saying you have to take into account all the extra costs as well. And as I said, you will be responsible for so many things like design and technical specs, proofreading, image processing, pre-press, production, distribution, and PR. So there's a lot to do, basically. And I think I just already covered a little bit this question, why does a photographer needs to bring money to the table at all, is because in photography book publishing, we have objects that are very intricate, that are very carefully designed. You have many more hours in design to invest. You have beautiful papers and materials. The stock is expensive. All of these things. And on the other hand, you have lower print runs. So if you compare it to, let's say, fiction, novels, it's a whole different game. You know, a novel you can print on cheaper paper. You only have to take care of the cover design. Um, you know, they have standard sizes. They don't have foldouts and all this kind of stuff. And they will sell in much, much bigger numbers. And also the audience for, let's say, a romantic novel or a crime story, these audiences are much easier to predict because people who buy or are into love stories or romantic, you know, what have you, or crimes, will buy also more books of this genre in the future. So this is much easier to predict, whereas a photo book, I mean, look at your collection of photo books in your own shelf. There will be many, many different topics because you're interested in genuine voices that tell you interesting stories, and it can be books about depression. It can be books that, I don't know, about children, about war, about all kinds of things. And so it's a very dynamic, very diverse audience on the other hand, and therefore buyers. And you don't buy a rather expensive photo book like every week or so. So this is the main difference here. You know, if we compare, let's say, literature or novels and art books and photography books. And this is simply why you have to support the independent publisher. I like to compare this actually to theaters or museums where you can not only rely on the revenues from ticket sales to finance your shows. You have to bring in so much more money in order to make a bigger show happen. You have to invest in advertisement, in insurances, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, here in this field, we're always dependent on extra money. May it come from sponsors or public funds or, you know, you name it. So this is basically to make you understand better why you have to bring money to the table. And if you really, if you don't feel comfortable with that, there's always the, you know, the possibility of self-publishing. I know some people don't value it so much, but like with the book I showed you, Christina de Middel or Peter van Ackmael, they were so successful with their self-published books. So there is a chance you can have a big success even with self-publishing if you don't want to bring money to the table for a publisher. So that's what I actually discussed now already. Should you go with a publishing house or should you do self-publishing? I would say, you know, with the publishing house, you have a great team by your side who's very experienced in what they do. May it be PR, marketing, sales, distribution, design, whatever, which you all have to take care of yourself when you self-publish. However, I found a voice that definitely speaks for self-publishing, and this is Peter Turnley. You may know him, the famous photojournalist, worked for Newsweek and Harper's Magazine, etc. And he says, I don't do it for the money, but I can say that before I self-published my books, I did 5 other books with publishers. I was always proud of the product, but I was always very frustrated. Firstly, I couldn't find them in bookshops, and secondly, I wasn't making a cent. So after a while, I said to myself, if it's like this, I am not going to lose the money. I'd rather at least know who's buying my books and have them be part of a community that follows my work. So what he points out there is that even if you bring money to the table with an indie publisher, it might not be the case that you gain a lot of money back. Not at all. This is not a given thing. And the other thing he points out is that, okay, if you self-publish, you will of course receive every order that comes in. This is all you because you will serve those orders, which might be a nuisance when you have to get the book out and wrap it and put some postage on it and send it out. But you will also have the name and address of that person. And you know, okay, this person is a new follower of mine, might be a potential collector of my stuff. So you have the most control over the people and knowledge about the people who buy your books and who are into your work. So I wanted to point that out in order to say something about self-publishing as opposed to publishing with a publisher as well. So let's get back to the book. Just as a reminder, whilst the book is all of the above, tangible proof, collector's item, etc., it can't stand alone, as I said before, and you will have to make sure it's like one piece of a bigger puzzle, surrounded by other important components that will help you to make your work known and make yourself known. And that is networking and building an audience for yourself and for the books, because otherwise the book is like in an empty space. It cannot exist without the right, it cannot exist without being embedded in this kind of network, at least not successfully. So what do you do? I like to describe it like really at a beginner's level, and I hope you don't mind me doing that. So where do you start when I say do networking? I think personally, portfolio reviews are a really wonderful opportunity to show your work, to get feedback, and to meet other photographers. Personally, I'm very much for in-person reviews. However, I know it's a lot of money that you have to invest sometimes, but there are also online reviews nowadays, which make it really cheap and affordable to get some knowledge and to get the work seen. However, you have to take into account that you're not going to have the personal connection with either the reviewer or other photographers that happen to be in the same place at the same time. And this is a very enjoyable part and also a very like nourishing part, the support and everything. So, but I would always say portfolio reviews, do them. Of course, you meet people at workshops. I would strongly recommend you go to exhibition openings as much as you can in your town and elsewhere. Go to photography festivals, mingle with the crowds, mingle with fellow photographers and experts, photography fairs, and let's not forget your own community. Show up, even if it's, sometimes we kind of disregard the local communities and the collectors and photographer scene, but I definitely think it's where you start from. So what to do before you go to the event, let's say a gallery opening or a museum show opens, know who you want to meet potentially, who could be there, and what does that person look like? If you know who you want to meet and what they look like, this could be very important. Then do a little bit of research about their background, because if you meet them, it's kind of cool to know, okay, who is this other person? And maybe you have funny things in common, or you can strike up a conversation and have your elevator pitch ready. I like to stress this and also practice this in my workshops is the elevator pitch. So, which means, sum up your project, the project that you work on at the time in one, maximum two sentences, like really boil it down and know what you have to say if somebody says to you, so tell me what you do, what are you working on? That's the moment where you just have to fire away. You cannot think about it at length because you will lose the other person's attention. So yeah, it's really useful for your own work to create this elevator pitch because it helps you select images, group them, kick them out, but it's also very handy if you're in a personal conversation, you're being asked, what you're working on and what the project is about. So, and if you happen to be in a conversation, don't just, give away like a monologue of your work and what you do and why it's also fabulous, but also listen carefully and ask questions. And in the end, be yourself. That's very important too. And with some people, it clicks and it works, and with others, it doesn't. And you can try as hard as you want, but it's not going to happen. That's normal. So after the event, I would strongly recommend you follow up that person via email, follow on social media. Well, I hope you got to exchange business cards. And add this new contact to your address list. And don't forget, yeah, networking is a matter of routine, basically. So everyone starts at a certain point and is nervous about it. To some, it's easier, to some, it's not. But it's just a matter of routine and practice. What I wouldn't recommend is adding a contact to your newsletter list without permission. It happens all the time. And personally, I am very much annoyed about it because I don't want to start my day with, deleting newsletters because I cannot read them all. And there's so many of them. So unless somebody explicitly says or writes back to you and says, yeah, sure, include me in your newsletter, don't do it. I mean, you can always ask, is it okay if, but you should ask because it shows respect. That's at least my take on it. Um, yeah, building an audience, easier said than done, I know. But so what to do if not a big gallery like takes your work on right away? Well, then you initiate events on a lower scale first, like in a local shop or in a restaurant you like, in a cafe or in a bank or in a hospital, whatever has walls and is frequented by the public. It can also be a community space or a bookshop or maybe then a smaller semi-professional gallery. These exist as well. So just don't be shy and ask people, or, if you're inspired by this, room, or if you think, oh, they might be able to afford, or might profit from hosting an exhibition opening, sometimes it's also interesting for the partner to do that, go ahead and do it and you will gain experience with hanging them and all the little details that you have to think of. This is learning by doing, so don't be shy to really initiate these events. um, Also, watch out for themed competitions, which may result in an award or publication or group exhibition, of course, if everything goes really well, as you can do with Lens Culture or Critical Mass Photolucida. And if nothing happens, at least it gets seen by a number of experts. And if these experts see your work continuously over the years, your name will stick. You know what I mean? It happened to me many, many times, and I can only recommend that too. And then we move on to a more commercial gallery or to a museum, an art institution. So this really goes step by step. Yeah, this is, just speaking from experience and from having followed many photographers in their careers. Yeah, and don't forget to keep your address book up to date, because these contacts that you gain throughout the years are so, so valuable. So we're almost done. At the end, I wanted to share my friend's history with you that is strongly tied to, it's a success story. It's a case study of Luigi Toscano. It's about building an audience for yourself and your work. And why do I show you Luigi's work? That's him. He started out not as a privileged person. He is a son of Italian guest workers here in Germany. He had a very difficult childhood. There was alcoholism involved on the parents' side, so he became a home child. He dropped out of school. He became a drug addict. When he got out of that addiction, living in the streets, having literally nothing, really, really terrible for about 10 years. He kind of got himself out there, started working, got sober, started working as a roofer, as a window cleaner, like really, how can I say, humble jobs as a bouncer. And then he found the camera and he took up a course about, basic photography, at a community center. So he fell in love with the camera and with taking pictures. And that's really when his life took another turn again. And he wasn't shy and he initiated a photographic series to be displayed in hospitals and in cafes and restaurants since 2003. So since then, a lot has happened. He started, after a couple of series, he started working on the project Lest We Forget, which is about Holocaust survivors. He took portraits of about 400 Holocaust survivors and he showed them outdoors. These frames that you see, he built them himself together with a team. This was all a matter of trial and error, totally. And he showed this now in numerous cities. I mean, he's from Germany. He showed them in the US, in different cities, in New York, in Washington, in Pittsburgh, but also in Europe, in Vienna, Paris, Geneva, Ukraine, you name them. So in many, many different cities. And so how did that happen? After he exhibited in cafes and, gathered his first experiences with outdoor exhibitions and found this topic, he gained the patronage of the state governor and then the foreign minister of Germany and then the federal president and the Central Council of Jews in Germany. So gathering more and more people that were important for the image of the project and himself and getting money in, that made the whole thing really successful. And of course a publishing house here based in Mannheim took interest in the project, and the book Lest We Forget has been published in 2 editions now. He also gained then the Order of Merit of the Federal Republic of Germany, and he's the first photographer to become UNESCO Artist for Peace. So, I mean, that's what I call a true, success story. And as I pointed out, he was not set up to do all this. And what I'm saying is if he can do it, you can do it too. So, yeah, just as a little positive example at the end. So, yeah, I would say publish by all means. And yeah, publishing a very good book on several levels is a complex matter that requires expert knowledge in more than one area, as I pointed out. And making a book based on your own photographic work is also one of the most fulfilling and rewarding steps you can take as a photographer. I'm sure of that. You're required to examine your own work for its core messages, condense it again, and at the same time enrich it with exactly the right ingredients, text, design, material, so that in the end you hold more in your hands than just the sum of individual images. So yeah, I think that's my last words about why you should publish. And I have to thank you for your attention so far. And yeah, I think I would like to open the floor now to your questions.
Thank you so much, Alexa. It's been a very interesting hour to listen to this, especially because many, many times I think we hear this kind of accusations that publishers take the money, but as you explained it so well, it's all the expertise that come in, all the network, all the presence at fairs, and all of that. So it's been wonderful to see, yeah, this kind of well explained. And also compared it to bigger publishers and then also to self-publishing. So I think now the viewers have an idea of maybe where they can head with their projects. I will just say here, also in our community, we have quite a few photographers that published new photo books. I'll link them in the chat while Alexa will be answering. And I always encourage you to kind of connect to your peers and ask them questions as well. We had books from Irina Unruh published last year, Byron, that was in the mentor program, Byron Smith. And then I know that Psuda also won Best Photo Book and had it published in Images Vevi, I think it's called like that. So I'll link it just to say that, yeah, besides what we just heard, please also ask your colleagues. And here, yeah, we have a few questions already. So I'll read the first one from Atiol El Malik, saying that he has a collection of work from my 14 years in South Sudan, and I'm working on a project for 5 photo books. I really need your advice on the best publishing house and country. What is the best photo book orientation? What should I avoid in my photo book? And he says he specializes in anthropological photography. For my photo books, what advice can you offer? What is the best place for publishing? And I'm sorry for a lot of questions.
No, that's okay. That's fine. And these are all legitimate questions. It's just that they cannot be answered generally. You know, first of all, I would break it down. If a photographer comes to me and says, I have 5 projects I'm working on or 5 potential books, I'm saying, okay, what is the most important one? We cannot, like, you can work on them parallel, okay, but I always feel that there should be a focus on one. And it's great if you have books following up, you know, because that might be also interesting for a publisher to know, oh, there's more to come. But I would definitely identify the one that is most urgent, either because you feel that way or because of um, like a historical date coming up, like an anniversary or something like that. You should think about that. And I don't know, I forgot all the other questions. I think one was like the orientation also, like I guess he means portrait or horizontal. Really, I mean, that depends on the photographs you're taking. If the majority is horizontal, I would not like to squeeze them in a portrait format. But usually people say, oh, portrait format is better than horizontal. I don't know. First of all, I don't want to compromise the photography. So that would be my first priority. And in which country they're published is not so much the matter. It should be a publisher that has been around for a while, that has a solid distribution network. That's something that's important. And I feel it's important that you identify with the program they are offering. And if you have the name of a couple of publishers, you research them, go to their website and make sure you see other books that have been published by them. Do you feel okay with this kind of neighborhood, you know, and see, do they go to fairs? Do they have a proper distribution system? You can see all that online. And if you want to take it a step further, go to a photo book festival where they are present and meet them, you know, see who works there. Maybe you can introduce yourself and leave a card and then, you know, through that, initiate the conversation. What did I miss?
I think this was a good advice. I'll just encourage Atiol. Maybe apply. I didn't tell in the beginning. I said I'll tell during this kind of transition to the Q&A. We will have a workshop with Alexa in 2 weeks' time, so on the 29th of January, at the same time. So if you have maybe a series to submit, or maybe a general overview of your work so that then Alexa can advise you. We are accepting applications to the workshop until this Sunday. And then next week with Alexa, we will decide who will be the 6 participants. So I'll send everyone that are in this session today a follow-up email alerting you on that. You'll get a link. So just be attentive to the email either today, later, or early morning tomorrow. So yeah, this is this for this question. Then Isabella is saying, thank you for the insightful talk. So even if I know that I need to bring money anyway to publish with a publisher, one question I always have is how to really find the right publisher for the work, besides that you like the work they published, and how
Mm,
to approach them.
yeah. Um, there's a lot of, yeah, background information that, for example, I have that you can't have because I've been in the business for so long. I know the people and I know their strengths and their weaknesses. So it's almost impossible to really make a choice, but it's apart from liking what they do, which is very important, I can answer maybe to the question how to approach them. I would look at their submission guidelines. They should be online and then just follow the rules basically. And don't be shy to, unless they say we won't answer if we are not interested, you can still follow up or, you know, if they don't answer you, you can still like if you meet them, like if they have a stand at a festival, you can still approach them there. So I would always try several times. I mean, don't be afraid to be a pain, just sometimes things get lost in communication and whatnot. And sometimes a personal connection makes the difference. So yeah, basically follow the guidelines and hope for the best. Or you can book an expert like me and say, okay, I need your advice here. And usually this can be done, let's say, within an hour. We can go through the list that you make. I can suggest some more publishers and then also weigh the pros and cons. So if they show interest and they send you a quote, you can still compare. So yeah, I have to admit it's not so easy to find the right publisher.
Yeah, Isabella, I know she already applied to the workshop, so let's see maybe that in 2 weeks' time. Then Atiol said, thank you. Let me just go to the next question from Tequila Minsky. So a question is, are there any grants available for the editing or researching when one wants to go through years of their images on a particular subject?
I think for going through your archive, basically that's your own business, unless you can maybe apply for residency that is not bound to, yeah, don't have to produce new work in order to honor the place of the residency. So maybe residency would be something. There is light work in Syracuse in the US. They have also printers and you can develop your stuff there. You can print it out as big as you want. So this is really an opportunity to work with your own stuff, and you don't have to create new work whilst being there. This is one thing that comes to mind. And I know in Germany there's this Grenzgänger Stiftung by the Bosch Foundation, Grenzgänger Stipendium, which means if you want to photograph abroad, it has to be a project abroad. They will give you funding so that you can travel and explore the region and take your photographs there.
I'm just trying to Google for these things and then paste them to
I can
the
also type it in real quick. Grenzgänger Stipendium. Hold on.
Bosch. Is it Bosch Stiftung or?
I will type it real quick.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then a question also from Tequila is, what do you think of university publishers?
I think it's definitely worth a shot. It's something that I'm not super familiar with. It's more in the US, but some really make remarkable, that's why I mentioned Princeton Architectural Press, also Princeton University Press, because some really take also liking into producing photo books. I think Duke University also has a big photography segment, so you would have to research that a little bit and also ask around, other photographers who have published with um, University Press too. I think it's a matter of research, really.
Yeah,
And
we
some independent publishers that are nonprofits, they also have a deal. Like I know that of Radius Books, that all their new publications automatically go out to public or to libraries, which is amazing because then you have, of course, a wonderful opportunity to have your book seen by many, many people automatically.
let me just see. Okay, we have 3 more questions. I think we will still have the session for 10 minutes just to say if you have a question, post it. Sayed was saying first, thank you, Alexa, and asking if there are any specific grants for publishing a book.
I think you always have to look, you have to research where you are based, basically, because even in Germany, there are like locally, there are different fundings and you can apply to maybe your subject matter is themed within the European Union. So you might find funds there. It's a very broad question, basically. But yeah, there is a good number of possibilities also in the US, but yeah, I mean, it really depends. Sometimes it's for female photographers, sometimes it's for young photographers. So, yeah, but I think you should be able, if you Google it, also to find some platforms that list these kind of general grant opportunities.
Maybe here a sub question. This one is from my side is how is it with sponsors of like sponsoring publishing a photo book or maybe having not sponsored but maybe at this kind of grants that come from specific causes, let's say, because if the I know, Sayed, you're working on a project of Muslims in the US. So maybe yeah, where if that's a project like that, how to find the funding from different kind of sources.
Well, first of all, there are sometimes societies that deal with the topic you might be dealing with, and they might be interested, if they cannot give money, they might be interested in pre-buying the book, for example, and share it amongst their community or give like buy them as giveaways in order to promote the work that they're doing. So financing also includes generating pre-sold books. Basically, if you come to a publisher and you say, hey, I have a list of, I don't know, 300 or 400 people, which sounds a lot, I know, but I mean, that can really finance your book, basically. So if you do it like over Facebook or crowdfunding or within these specific groups of interest, you can be lucky. And also, a company may want to buy books if they attach to your or relate to your subject matter. I mean, it doesn't happen so often, I have to say, but if you work as a commercial photographer, and I know of a photographer from the UK I knew, and she worked for a fashion brand, and then she did this personal project, and they liked the style and the sensitivity, and so they, oh, that's great, we're going to buy 400 books. That's fantastic, of course. And then you can have in the imprint, they can have their logo and whatnot, or their own cover. There's different options, but yeah, you have to think a little bit creatively in that regard.
Great, thank you. Yeah, he says that's a great idea. Thank you so much. And time to get the community involved. Indeed, I think even I was thinking if you do a crowdfunding and we know that we have like 1,000 people in the community, if everyone contributes $2, let's say, it's a start. So I think sometimes, yeah, it's really to start with your community, as also Alexa you said, it's and then just building a network from that
Right.
onwards. I think
Yeah.
it's
And
great.
and the longer you work on that network, the more likely it is, the better chances you have that you will be supported. And that means really going out there, meeting people, talking to people. And I know it's like it's not so easy like to travel around all the time, but it's also so rewarding in so many ways. So I can only encourage you to do that, even if you don't know the exact outcome of each trip you take. Like I go to Paris Photo and Arles like every year, and I don't know, what's going to come out of it, but I know I'm going to be revived and inspired by the shows I see, by the people I meet, because we're all like-minded persons, and then I don't know, you meet people you don't know if they're going to be um relevant to your career or not, but it can happen. And sometimes or most of the time it's like also keeping in touch over a longer period of time that might be the key to success. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think it is what you say. It's also about meeting people in person that does make a difference. Because I think online you can only discuss to a certain extent. And while we do portfolio reviews online, I do feel that all the times in between that you have in person and all the breaks and all the connections that you make in between, it is really much different than what it is online. So even maybe just going to a festival that's in your kind of area. Yeah, just explore, and I think then this kind of more connections start happening.
Right.
Then we had a question from Amy. First, thanking you so much for this. So first question, that she heard that photographers are often asked to contribute around 20,000. So Amy is from the US. Is this an average amount for a print run of 1,000? When the photographer contributes toward the costs, at what point does the photographer recoup any of these costs? For instance, if the photographer raises 20K, do they immediately share in the net proceeds from the book? So this was the first question.
Well, I would say 20,000 is a realistic number. It depends on the publisher. Before the pandemic, it was more affordable. It was more around 10 to 15. But I mean, all prices have risen. Paper is a source that is super precious and expensive. Uh, Everything, energy, I mean, you name it, it's just like it has risen like incredibly. So yeah, this is a realistic number. And depending on the model the publisher has for you, you will gain money, let's say, sometimes maybe from the first book sold, but more realistically, I would think after they break even. Like, let's say if 500 books are sold from the 501st copy onwards, you will get a certain percentage of the sales. So maybe you recoup only a couple of €100 from the sales that the publisher makes, but what you can do is you should get a good amount of books for yourself, which you can sell yourself, not to booksellers, of course, because that's the business of the publisher, but to other people, like on your website or your community, or people, if you have a speaking engagement, that's something you have to deal with. You have to talk about with the publisher, okay, where can I sell my own books? And that can be successful. And of course, from that batch of books, you will get much more money back. But other than that, I would consider this as an investment in your career rather than a way to not lose money, make money, etc. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, and you need a big network, obviously, of people, and yeah, because there's such a network involved in one production of one photo book, that it's really, yeah, very important. So Amy is also asking how important it is to attend photo festivals and fairs like Paris Photo to sell the book.
Um, yeah, I think as we said, visiting these fairs like on a frequent basis is super important to establish your network, to broaden your network. Um, as I said, if you can't afford to go to Paris, like especially from the US, focus on your like in within the US on festivals there that you like, don't force yourself to do something that you can't afford or that you don't like. But meet people all the time, and try to also meet the same people if possible. Like that, identify your favorite galleries and go to their openings over and over and over again, because also the gallerist will recognize you and learn to know you, and that's also a very important factor. I forgot the second question.
Yeah, this how important it is
Yeah,
to attend this kind of to sell
it's
the book.
super
Yeah.
it's super important. I wouldn't say, oh, you have to go to this and that. For Europe, yes, I would say Arles, and maybe for photojournalists it was Perpignan for a very long time,
Mhm.
is very important, and there might be others that are more important to photojournalists than rather than to fine art photography people. But yeah, just go.
Yeah. And then we had a question where to go. Yeah, that's good. Sayed was also asking, is there a resource to find photo book festivals in the US? I personally don't know. Maybe someone from the audience knows as well, because I know in Europe there is, in Denmark, one of our previous guests, Moritz Neumiller, he's the curator, I think, of the festival that's dedicated exclusively to photo books. But in the US, I'm not aware of this kind of place. Alexa, do you know of any? photo book festival, like specifically dedicated to photo books?
Oh yeah, there is ICP has established a photo book
Mhm.
festival, I think 5 years ago. And also there is a smaller one happening in Brooklyn. I don't know the name right now from the top of my head. And there are two bigger ones, Printed Matter happening in
Mhm.
New York and in LA, like alternating between the two. Yeah, I mean, there is, along of iPad, there are a number of book publishers. These are the first ones that come to mind in the US. And of course, in Europe, along with Paris Photo Arles, they have all these independent book events, which is amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, there's really so many smaller places. I think obviously I'm also based in Europe, so I know here in Slovenia we have one
Oops, sorry,
tiny
the connection doesn't seem
publisher.
to be stable right now.
What?
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah, I was seeing if it's my internet. I don't know. Today, I also in the beginning, it was kind of a bit breaking up. But yeah, I was saying that there's so many small publishers that then also do this kind of small photo book fairs. We have one in Maribor, which is the second city of Slovenia, but it has quite a growing number of people that want to visit, you know. So it is also kind of very community based, but it's getting more and more
Right.
attention also internationally. So yeah, I think also finding the small events. But I do think, yeah, it does require a lot of time spent in like on the computer trying to find the publishers, the festivals. At the community, we've been doing this list of grants and festivals that is available among our resources just for the audience to know. It's in our library. If you don't find this, let us know. We haven't started with publishers yet because I think it's quite a big task to kind of identify and to, yeah, try to find them. But I think it could be next on our list because also it is my personal kind of yeah, not hobby, but I really love photo books. I wouldn't consider myself a collector, but I'm really drawn to books in general. I studied literature besides art history, so yeah, books were always kind of a thing that it always attracted me. And then the way how they are presented, the different papers, all of the story that also the books tell. As an exhibition, I think can tell a story in terms of how it is set up, the how do you select how you present it? Also, a photo book tells us so much from from the decisions you make, right? In terms of
Absolutely, yeah.
design and paper and formats and all of that. So
Right, right,
yeah,
right.
we'll try to.
Also, what I wanted to say is there are a number of publishers out there. As I said, as photojournalists, there might be some publishers that are easier to identify to deal with your subject matter, like, as I said, photo evidence. Um, but for example, I saw the name Byron Smith. They published with the German publishing house I know very well, Kettler. And Kettler is not at first sight the typical publisher for this kind of subject matter, nor was Kehrer Verlag before I became the acquisitions editor, because I found, okay, these are very important issues, and then started a series all about, war photography, photojournalists, etc. So even that is a niche that is harder to identify, and it's not so obvious. But yeah, so it would be great if you established a list of those publishers, and I know it's
Yeah.
a lot of research, yeah.
Yeah, we'll try. We'll try because I think it's interesting to have. I know there's also, I think now the photo book kind of market is kind of on the rise. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I do feel that there is much more interest and that it is a bit more accessible. So yeah, we'll definitely dig more into that. We have another question from Tequila. So if you self-publish, is there a way to connect with someone? To go to Frankfurt Book Fair, for example.
Oh, I see. Um, as a self-publishing person, you would rather go to the alternative festivals, book festivals that allow single people in. Like Frankfurt is definitely not the place because A, it's very expensive and you have to be a solid publisher. You have to have a list in order to get in. And by the way, Frankfurt is for us. being in the photography world is not so relevant any longer. I know we used to go there as with a publishing house for years and years and years, have a big stand there, but it's not the place where things are happening anymore. It's rather Paris Photo, for example. It's rather Arles. So yeah, and these are also the places where you find different like satellite fairs that will welcome you with even if you just have one or two or three books on your back, so to say.
Nice. Okay, so I think we're past the time already, but we have another question from Amy. So her question is, do you know if self-published books can be distributed by DAP or
DAP.
DAP or Ingram,
Ingram, yeah.
etc.
These
Is
are the big distributions in the US. I don't think so. They will take on only like solid publishers that are like businesses. And that's the crucial point with self-publishing, that you will have to do the distribution yourself. But there are organizations like in Europe, it's Idea Books in the Netherlands, and they take on, also smaller or like single books that they can distribute. So there are companies that offer this service, but not so many. And distribution, by the way, is always it's a problematic issue. Yeah.
so Amy, I hope you got a bit of insight into this. I think we can take one more question if it comes in a bit, but in this time, I just want to thank all for the questions. I think this was quite an engaging debate. I think we have a lot of people working on very personal projects, I would say, and very long-term projects. And I think, yeah, the when you explained that some projects came out of necessity just to tell a story and to keep it as a kind of fact archive history, I think it's very, very important to have this insight. And I think people will definitely join for the workshop. So yeah, Alexa, thank you so much for this insight. I think we really appreciated it. Also, John Stember says, thank you for sharing your expertise, Alexa. And yeah, people will see the recording as well. So we're always happy to have the recording so people can go back to and maybe even ask more questions in our Discord. You can always find us there. If you'll have any specific questions, just write us there. Then to everyone that I just have to say, I shared the link to the workshop and how to apply in the chat. If you're having some difficulties with accessing our community website that's under login, I'm having difficulties and we've been having difficulties through Chrome. So maybe try another browser. I'm just going to say that. If not, send me an email and I'll try to help you with that. So this is this. And yeah, we'll get more on publishing in 2 weeks with Alexa. So thank you so much for now. And we'll be in touch very soon for the workshop on publishing with very specific projects from our 6 selected alumni.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And thanks for giving me the platform and to talk about my favorite topics. And thank you for all the work that you do for your members. I think it's truly valuable and it seems to be a really great community. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was our pleasure, and it was really great to connect again after the portfolio reviews last year. And yeah, it's been a pleasure having you in the community. So thank you
Thank you,
so
Nika.
much,
Thank you
and
very much.
we'll see you soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.